they are doing the same thing again. It's been controversial because it hasn't always helped them, because it did require a separate Brazilian receiver, and which made it, at least at first, more expensive for the consumers there. But the government basically felt this was a good way to stimulate the local manufacturing economy, and that did play out. Nowadays, those variations are much easier to adapt into systems. A lot of it's just firmware or software even changes. And in many cases, if you got to make a new SKU, a new product, just because the power supply is different, like it would have to be from US to here, it's very easy to add other things in. And a lot of, especially the tuners system on a chip today, is just a little different firmware or software to change it. And so they have political reasons for doing it as well as technical reasons. But I will say, to their credit, the tech people down there are really, they've done a great job on this evaluation. If you really want to do, build your own kind of thing, they ideally don't want to totally invent stuff. They want to take a look at what everybody else is doing and pick a best of breed, put a system like that together. And that's what they are doing. And yeah, it will also, they think, and probably they're right, stimulate some local investment in manufacturing, just as the last two rounds kind of did down there. But as we said, it probably won't just be limited to Brazil. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks. And I do want to drill into fragmentation a little bit further in a minute, but we'll let Bob go ahead and get his question first.
I might regret asking this.
Later.
What about a Jamaica implementation team?
Yeah, I was going to say that we didn't need one, as
we have Claire.
As Mark was saying, and for Brazil and India, we've seen, because, as Mark said, what the implementations teams do, the reason they're formed. What he didn't mention is that not all ATSC members can be part of the implementation team. You pay to be an ATSC member. You pay an additional fee to be any one of those implementation team members. So the fact that implementation teams exist show that there are at least a few members of ATSC who are additionally interested in the international market, either one or more, that they are willing to pay additional effort and send their people and spend their time on it. In Jamaica, you guys did your own homework. You did your own selection, and we think you made the right choice. And you've already made it so in the regulatory context. So ATSC didn't need to actually put an implementation team to evangelize. However, the same willingness and interest among ATSC members that's shown by their joining implementation teams to go to an international venue and work with them. That same interest is there among ATSC members, except they can apply it directly to you here. We don't need an ATSC team to pull that together, because there aren't any necessarily common obstacles yet. You've already selected it. So now you can talk directly to these vendors that are here and beyond to help, because their willingness is obvious to help do that deployment here. That's my thinking on it anyway. That's why no team, Bob, but no team needed. The team is basically able to just work with Jamaican broadcasters to make it happen now that it's been selected.
We're here. This is the implementation.
Yeah, right. This is the SWAT team.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. We're doing it now. So.
Well, and I think the other important thing to consider is that ATSC is primarily a technical organization. We design technology together, and dabbling into market implementations is an area that is sort of not. I wouldn't say that it's not core, but ATSC would not get into the fray of that kind of activity unless there was a need to organize the members who are interested in that particular thing. So implementation teams are things that are formed after the standard is completed, and we want to do implementation. And what we found with India, as well as with Brazil, is that there were a lot of companies within ATSC who wanted to participate, but having the Brazilian SBTVD forum have a relationship with each and every one of those members who were all talking about ATSC3 would have been very difficult, and it wouldn't have been very efficient for anybody. And it made a lot of sense to put together a team that was going to kind of organize these efforts. Yeah, I've got you, Alan. One quick second. The other thing that I think is really important about the idea about after the standard is written, now we're getting into the marketplace. We have competitors who are working together. And it's important within the implementation team, not only does it carry an extra fee, partly because we only want members who have a true and genuine interest in it, skin in the game, if you will, but we also have another agreement that goes with it that says we understand that we are now working with actual products and product roadmaps and business plans and business interests together, and that our competitors might be on this team, and we need to recognize and understand that. That's sort of why we have implementation teams. But we would not form one if there was not a need for it. And like Skip said, that seems to be the case here, as you are all making direct connection with the right people already. Alan, you wanted to?
Yeah, sorry, I just very briefly. In the case of Brazil, Brazil issued a call for proposals and ATSC chose to respond. And PT6, before the implementation team existed, the guys on the panel and Madeline and a whole bunch of other people, I think, who were in the room, worked to make that response, right? And once that response was accepted and there were further testing and things that required something like an implementation team, that's when it formed. Jamaica, like Skip said, that nothing like that happened. You guys didn't issue a grand challenge to us like prove this, or here's a call for proposals, respond to it, and that's kind of why things are.
Madeline,
we're
we
here.
have another question back here.
Okay.
Thank you. If you recall, back in 2008, 2009, mobile TV was the rage in Europe. Nokia was behind that huge project. And in fact, we launched mobile TV here in Jamaica in 2010. And the biggest challenge, which I understand why it failed, was that the telcos globally saw it as a threat to, at the time, 3G, 4G, and those investments that are being made. And we actually have 5G now being contemplated here in Jamaica and so on. What has changed? Why we think, and back then was what, DVB-H that was launched here. What has changed? Why you think ATSC3 or the telcos won't gang up again and say, no, we're not going to support that because we're making all these investments in 4G and 5G?
Yeah, I think that's a terrific question. And one of the things that we find with voluntary adoptions is whatever it is you're doing had better work for the whole ecosystem, all up and down the chain, because if the chain breaks anywhere, the thing will not succeed. And I think that the difference with what's going on in India versus what happened in those days in the United States and in Jamaica and in Europe is that India has a problem to solve on the carrier's point of view. So the carriers are already experiencing a level of congestion which is preventing them from signing up new subscribers and is diminishing the quality of service that they're able to provide to the people. And they are looking for solutions. And so in India, they're much more interested in a collaborative effort compared with other countries where the cellular operators might not be experiencing those same issues. One of the things about India also is that, in America, in the US rather, who buys cell phones? Well, I don't buy a cell phone. The carrier buys the cell phone, right? And then I go to the carrier and I buy a cell phone there. So who is governing what goes into that phone? The carrier is governing. They're going to go to the phone maker and say, these are the phones we want you to make. And the fact that an individual person might like to have an ATSC3 chip or a mobile handheld or a DVB-H or whatever, the cell phone makers don't care. They need the carriers to go to them and say, we want you to do this, right? And what we see in India is a genuine interest, not only in the public broadcaster to reach the cell phones, but in the cell phone operators to get that cricket match off of their bandwidth and put it on the broadcaster's spectrum, knowing that people are still going to be watching it on their phones. So, whether these market projects play out in the marketplace with success is to be determined. This is the one thing about also with implementation teams, there's no guarantees. You join the implementation team, you sign the agreement, you pay the extra fee, you do a lot of work, and the country may or may not respond to what you're suggesting. But with India, the thought process is, if India does adopt ATSC 3.0 as a direct-to-mobile standard, and carriers like Reliance Jio are behind this effort, then now you have cell phone makers who have a 1.2 billion unit market to build to. And suddenly it becomes more of a possibility, perhaps in other countries, where the price of adding an ATSC 3.0 chip goes down and it becomes a lot easier to do. So we'll see if that happens. It's very much a market-driven initiative, as you can imagine, but that's where the opportunity is presenting itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Just answer a different part of the question. You brought up DVB-H and some of the 3GPP multicast and broadcast capabilities. And I would say, we tried that once and it didn't work is not the way to innovate. That's 14 years ago. We're 2 generations better in terms of video codecs than we were back then. We're probably in H.264, maybe early H.264 adoption back then. I think, I showed something earlier today showing the dramatic gains. People say, if the pandemic happened in 2010 and not 2020, would we have had Zoom? Would we have had the ability to do video on our phones, on our laptops? Video has advanced quite a bit. And I think, we see so many people consuming video on mobile devices today when that wasn't possible back then. With regard to the 3GPP standards, there are 3GPP standards for multicast and broadcast services, and those have been part of 4G and 5G standards, and they have been deployed in some phones. Most of the operators who've tried those to launch commercial services on those have not been satisfied, including India. So, ATSC 3 was sort of built from the ground up to have operating points that would support mobile video broadcast, whereas it was a little bit of a bolt-on, in my opinion, in 3GPP. Thanks.
Right, and the other thing that's changed in the interim is the spectrum holdings of the wireless carriers has dramatically increased. So a good bit of which they got from broadcast, but we won't go there. But the point is, they have more spectrum to work with than they did. So yeah, just because it didn't work before. But what I think one point that Alan made that deserves stress is that unlike the component approach to say, let's add mobile to this, ATSC 3 was from the ground up. Mobile was just one of its many capabilities. If you want it, you got it, but you don't have to use it in mobile. It can still be just an even better method to, building penetration, higher capacity for fixed TV reception. So, but if mobile's there, if you want to, then that's the real way to have all the players potentially be able to move forward. As Madeline said, you want everybody to win here. That's you don't want one person to have a step forward and the others to have a step back. All the stakeholders have to feel like there's something in it for me, for any new technology to really succeed. And so that's the approach here, to taking a holistic view of a brand new system and then simulcast for a period of time to have the legacy technology still be available until folks can move on to, the consumers move on to the next generation. And that has worked. That has worked, as we've seen in many countries around the world with different systems. And so that's what we expect to see happen again. And we're seeing it happen now in the US and Korea, and hopefully it'll be happening that way even faster than it's taken the U.S. to do it because of the spectrum availability here. For Jamaica to do the same thing and have it be successful for a number of different stakeholders, but consumers, the broadcasters, and even educators and so forth. And healthcare, as we've seen earlier today, those great new public service kinds of opportunities and emergency alerting and so on.
I think Aldo, you want to chime?
Thank you. And one last thing to consider as an air interface. So those of you that attended Gary's very thorough coverage of the ATSC physical layer, you should all remember that there are various operating points under which ATSC can operate, and at that very low end, for very low carrier to noise ratios. In other words, you can have a very high reliability of the signal. It should outperform EMBMS. And so if you pick that right selection of modulation and coding parameters, you should have a better air interface than you can get, especially for multicast to many devices.
Yeah, he's quite right. And there have been some white papers out that compare the 3GPP current system. No doubt they will improve it over time. But right now, ATSC 3.0 is actually a better system for mobile than the 3GPP system. And, even if you don't get into phones, here is the device, plugs into your phone, and it's got a little antenna if you need. There's another device out there that looks like a cell phone case. You put your cell phone in the case, boom, and you have it. So we will see what happens, but your point is very well taken, and I think that the quid pro quo in India between the broadcaster and the MNOs is that the India broadcaster wants to reach the phone, and the MNO wants to get some of their one-to-many traffic off of their system, and so they both have an incentive to get ATSC 3.0 or a similar system into cell phones. It's a long road. We'll see where we go. But what happened in June was a huge step forward. The other thing I want to talk about very briefly is fragmentation. It's interesting what's happening in Brazil. But when we're talking about mobile, okay, we need to talk about a global standard that is not regionally fragmented. Because if you want to get on a plane and go wherever you're going to go, and you expect your phone to work, your carrier may charge you a little extra money, right? But it works.
Only $10 a day.
It's a little bit different than with fixed TVs. Most people are not going to take their 43-inch, 70-inch, whatever TV in their carry-on bag and take it to another country. So the fact that we have regional disparities between television sets or even automobiles doesn't seem to be a big deal. But when it comes to cell phones, and we talk about international adoption of a broadcast standard to cell phones, I personally certainly hope it's going to be based on ATSC 3.0. And if it is, I think that all of these countries are going to need to get together on this, and that Brazil can't have its own, and India can't have its own, and the US can't have its own, and blah, blah, blah. I think we need to really focus on a single global mobile broadcast standard, ideally based on ATSC 3, which may ultimately be pushed through 3GPP if we are able to work through those. But I have one more question that I want to ask our esteemed panel, and actually it's kind of a question for our audience as well, which is assuming that adoption of this technology in other countries has benefit and value to those that are already using it, how can the people of Jamaica help promote ATSC 3 in other countries? Well, I guess I should ask first, do you agree that there is a benefit to 3.0 countries when other countries get on board? And if that's true, what can we do together to make that happen?
Yeah, just the obvious answer is the rising tide raises all boats. In this case, lowers all prices, we would hope, in a global marketplace. As I said, it's not as big a deal as it used to be, given that these systems on a chip basically can do all of those, all the global systems. And it's just a matter of flipping some bits to get the ATSC 3.0 system to be on there, on that hardware. So, but point is, I think just that the general momentum builds as you see more and more countries take it on. And it helps speed the development of the entire ecosystem around it. And so I think it does have general benefit as more countries join.
What he said, and I think when we think about economies of scale and we think about sort of the commonality and the common components, of these systems, we should sort of divide it into sort of what needs to be hardware and what can be quote unquote software defined. Term I'm not in love with, but the physical layer, that's hardware, right? The video codec, that's hardware. Audio, often implemented on DSPs. Transport, software. Application, software. But we want economies of scale, particularly on the hardware blocks.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't really have much to add. I will say though that even small differences cost, right? It doesn't matter. Like that, Skip keeps saying, "Oh, it's just software." Well, I'm a software person, and I've spent my entire career writing software and gotten paid for it. So somebody's paying for that someplace. And there's a fairly significant maintenance cost to all of these differences as well. So if a manufacturer, Sony or somebody, has to produce a different television for every market, and they do often because of regulatory issues. But that, the smaller the change, the easier it is to maintain, the easier and the cheaper it is in each market, because they don't have to hire as many people, they don't have to do as much work on it. So I think the closer all of the standards are, and I agree, the better. And that's a pretty broad statement, but I think that's absolutely true.
All right. Well, I want to give Aldo the last word because I do want my other question. Oh, we have a question before we move on. Yes, sir.
Amy's doing email.
Mike is on its way.
Okay, we speak about benefit, but what are the benefits for like small state like Jamaica helping to develop, to come up with new ideas to put inside of ATC? What do countries, because every country you approach will have different ideas to how to make it better for the entire system. What do small states like Jamaica get out of such intellectual forwardness to this?
Great question. You
So I think ATSC welcomes all comers and contributors, and ways to improve the ATSC system are beneficial to the entire community. Please join the technical groups and participate and contribute. If the contribution is more of a market nature, planning team is sort of what's in it for you. Broader adoption, lower prices, more choice, more people building for this market.
Yeah, if it's not already in there as an option, which there is, as you know, quite a bit of flexibility, we've certainly already adopted additional things that have been suggested by others. And so, yeah, as Alan says, bring it to the ATSC. I know TVJ's already a member. Maybe others want to join, and that's your voice there. All these groups meet very frequently and have adopted a lot of changes. Every year, a new version of the standard comes out with plenty of additional elements. So it's already an evolving system and very open to those kinds of suggestions.
Yeah, I'll make the other comment that to that point, at least the standard that I work on that I talked about yesterday, the 344 standard, is moving at the speed of the internet. Yeah. So we make changes that almost daily. It seems like, not that it's fluid, but because we're doing these releases, right? And we're hooked in with the consumer manufacturer or the consumer electronics manufacturers to make sure that's all in lockstep. But if there's something in Jamaica that you want to do, some some application that we haven't thought about. And you know, we've got a lot of smart people. There's a lot of good membership, but we haven't thought of everything. That's pretty clear. So if there's something that Jamaica needs, either from the application layer, the transport, or anything, you let us know immediately, and we will start thinking about putting it in, or join the teams and bring it to us.
Join ATSC.
That's the president speaking. But anyway, so you know that benefits everybody in the world, and it will bring everybody up. Higher water floats all boats, as Skip said.
All right, and I know that we're about a minute over, but I still want to give Aldo the last word, which is how can the people of Jamaica help promote ATSC 3.0 around the world? Because you do have a responsibility now. You're part of the community, and we need your help. We can't do it alone.
Thanks. Well, one way is, as I suggested earlier, be active in some of the international discussions, such as in the rapporteur group. There are other fora that technical people here and planning people here can participate that will also inform the rest of the world as to the particular use cases that will be implemented here. So this morning, for instance, we heard about emergency alerting, we heard about distance education, and this is a very fertile ground for those kinds of implementations to grow and be very successful. And as they are being developed, and then as they are being implemented, and let's say as they're successful, as they're shown to be successful, that'll be a great example throughout the world, because there's so many nations that can use those kinds of capabilities.
Exactly. You guys are now ambassadors. You know, come with us to Brazil. Come with us to IBC. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about how ATSC is working for you, the challenges, the benefits, all of the things. And, you know, I had a conversation with somebody earlier about, you know, the types of people that are here presenting to you. You know, next time it's all of us on the stage, right? It's not just us broadcasting information out to you. You guys are going to become part of the show, part of the ambassador group, and part of the world of evangelization, if you will, of what you are doing here. And I would say, I think Aldo, or maybe it was Skip said it, I think you guys are going to get another world first, which is that I think you're going to be the world's first country with 100% coverage of ATSC 3.0 in a nation. I think you're going to beat South Korea and the US hands down. So yes, join the conversation.
Yeah, be even evangelists in the Caribbean. I mean, let's
Absolutely.
you're number one here, but hopefully not the last of the Caribbean nations to go. And you know who the other players are a lot better than we do down here. So let's see if that can't be the first venue for your ambassadorship to take off.
All right, well, I know that we're out of time and then some. Thank you for a couple of extra minutes on this important topic. And I think we're ready to turn it over to, is it break or is it another, what are we doing?
Oh, cool.
Break time.
We're eating
All right,
break.
break time. Thank you. 3:45, Amy says. Hey, well done, yeah. Well done, you guys. Awesome.